So I'm sending data to your YouTube channel, but I thought that there is also Zoom broadcast. Is it not?
Yeah. Here we set up the Brandeis Zoom link. Yeah.
Oh, you already done?
They're waiting.
Oh, you are okay. You are using my Zoom. Okay.
Could you send it to them?
Okay. Okay. I got confused because there was another Zoom that was.
Anyway, don't get not confused.
YouTube, it's already streaming. Can you check whether you're able to see?
He's managing too many things. Message said 10:30. His schedule says 10. Then it's 10:30, and the people in Portland are on the Brandeis Zoom call, and he's calling in another besides the Brandeis Zoom call.
Are you able to? Yeah.
Too many things. Can you hear my voice also?
Not able to hear on Zoom.
Now you can hear on Zoom? Okay. Shall we begin?
Can you speak on Zoom? Just I want to hear like whether you can hear on Zoom.
Can you hear me, Prabhuji?
Oh, fantastic. So we're ready to begin.
Yeah, I'm going to hang up from this call.
Okay, fine. Portland Prabhus, please accept our apologies. We had some technology snafus, but we're ready to begin. So let us begin. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine.
On Zoom, I can see the video.
Prabhuji, we can all hear, Prabhuji. We can hear.
Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desardine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Most of you that have joined the call, you can kindly mute your speaker system. So when we get to the end of the questions and answers, you'll be able to unmute yourself and speak, and hopefully we'll be able to hear you as you speak, or you can send some question or topic you'd like discussed to the chat box, and off we go. Today's a very special day, Diwali, and Diwali falls within a very special month, the month of Damodar, or the month of Kartik. And during this Diwali, it's easy to search on your Vaishnava calendar. Diwali is signifying the Festival of Lights, Diwali, the Festival of Lights, where Ramchandra is returning back to Ayodhya on the dark moon night in this month of Kartik. We began the month of Kartik during the full moon, which took place November 1st. And here we're on the dark moon night, 14 days after the full moon. And before that, the slaying of Ravana took place on our Vaishnav calendar on the Trayodashi day, or October 25. So the math is pretty simple. 6 days plus 14 days, many things transpired in Lanka. But we're going to be hearing that the journey from Lanka back to Ayodhya via the Pushpaka Vimana, according to Vibhishan, it would take 1 day. And they made a couple of stops along the way because the Vimana, the Pushpaka Vimana, is a very special airplane. Not just an airplane, it's a mind plane. It travels at the speed of the mind, which we know is really fast. And its steering mechanism is the mind, and it can travel even without a driver. Just you desire something and off you go. And the Pushpaka Vimana is very flexible in terms of space. We'll hear that as we go along. It became humongous, very, very, very big. And all of the chiefs of the Vanar army, as well as Vibhishan and Ram and Sita and Lakshman, along with the wives of the chiefs of the Vanar army, all were able to be comfortably accommodated, much bigger than a 747. Very, very big, palatial, and very fast. So those many days, 6 plus 14 days, transpired since the killing of Ravan. And I'll make a very quick summary of what transpired during that number of days, according to Valmiki Ramayana. After the slaying of Ravan came Ram's instructing Vibhishan to perform a proper funeral for his elder brother. As the funeral proceedings were going forward, there's a whole sarga or section where Mahodri and other queens came forward and grieving over the loss of their husband, the king, Ravana. When the funeral was completed, the next section is Ram instructing Hanuman to go find Sita, because he knew exactly where Sita was, and bring Sita to Ram. The joyous news was passed on to Sita. Ram is victorious. Ravana is dead. Oh, one section. Vibhishan was coronated as king in between. So Vibhishan is the new king. Sita was brought by Hanuman. And you know this terrible scene where Ram will not even look at her. And she's bewildered. And he said, "You're redeemed. You may go as you wish." And she's smashed. And an arrangement is made for her to prove her purity by entering into fire. The demigods have descended, and they're pleading with Ram to no avail. Don't put her through this difficulty. She underwent the difficulty, emerged from the fire, and Ram accepted the hand of Sita. At that point is where we're going to begin. It's Sarga 119 in Yudhya Kanda, the battle chapter or canto of Valmiki Ramayana. And the section begins with Ram being reunited with his father. Lord Shiva is present, and Lord Shiva introduces Dasaratha to Ram. Here's your father riding atop this aerial spaceship from the heavenly planets. So we're going to hear, that's the starting point, and now just looking forward this journey from Ayodhya, from Lanka to Ayodhya, via the Pushpaka Vimana. We'll hear the description. But the Pushpaka Vimana rises and stops, makes a halt at Kishkinda, and the queens of the chief warriors are allowed to come and join for the coronation ceremony of Ram. Then the Pushpaka Vimana continues, Ram narrating pastimes all the way, describing things to Sita. Narrating, in other words, the whole Ramayana is narrated once again, as happens many, many times in Ramayana. It comes in for a landing or halts at the ashram of Bhardraj, and from Bhardraj Muni's ashram, it descends somewhere not far from Bharata's ashram, and then it proceeds to Bharata's ashram, and then Pushpaka Vimana is sent back to Kuvera. You can travel just by mind giving it direction, so off it goes back to Kuvera, where it came from. And then the citizens come to Bhardraj, to Bharata's ashram, receive Ram. Many, many nice things are narrated. We'll hear a little bit. And then from his ashram, that is Bharata's ashram in Nandigram, they travel by chariot into Ayodhya, and the scene is Diwali. Many, many, many lamps honoring the arrival of Lord Ramachandra on the dark moon night. So that's Diwali in a very quick sketch. So let's go back to Lanka, where Lord Shiva is making an introduction or a greeting ceremony for Ram and Lakshman and Sita to greet Dasaratha. We're going to spend a little bit of time discussing something that I find puzzling, maybe you also find puzzling, that Dasaratha, upon his departure into heaven, instead of Ayodhya in the spiritual world. And that's what Valmiki Ramayana tells us. We know from Bhagavad Gita, whatever the mind is fixed on at the time of death, that state you will attain. Very clear. And what was on Dasaratha's mind, other than Ram, his whole life since Ram was born, was in Balakanda, a very detailed description of his attachment to Ram. So what was he thinking of at the time of death? And where did he go? He went to the spiritual world. However, Valmiki Ramayana tells us that he went to heaven. And from heaven, he was brought by Vimana to greet Ram after his victory over Ravan. So let's spend a little bit of time on that topic. There are a few different perspectives. Particularly prominent is the Sri Vaishnava perspective on why Dasaratha went to heaven instead of the kingdom of God. Parashara Bhatt, who was the son of Kuresha, who was one of Lord, one of Ramanujacharya's principal disciples, when speaking about Ramayana, was asked the same question: why is it that Dasaratha went to heaven instead of the spiritual world? And he spoke very stridently. He said, actually, he should have gone to hell. With attachment for Ram, he should have gone to hell, because what did he do? He didn't have the proper discrimination to place the principle of surrender above his word. Now, keeping one's word is a mode of goodness. And an ideal king keeps his word. An ideal person keeps their word. You don't give your word unless you keep your word. And subordinate to Sarvadharmam Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Braja, he sent Ram to the forest to keep his word. He should have gone to hell, according to Parasharabat. Or, as we're going to hear shortly, Dasaratha it is said by Dasaratha and by Lord Shiva, you delivered your father. That's what Parasharabat says. He didn't go to hell because Ram delivered him from the sin. And it is understood by Sri Vaishnava Acharyas that besides Parasharabat, that he had to undergo that tribulation of taking again material existence. And this is another puzzle for me. So when it comes to questions and answers, I'm going to give the answer I don't know. How is it that he still had the same body as Dasaratha? That when Ram saw Dasaratha ascending in this Vimana, they recognized each other. Now maybe he had a different form and they just recognized each other even though Dasaratha had a different form. It's a puzzle. But he was there to observe the pastimes of Ram in the forest, because demigods have the capacity to travel about here and there. And another important feature explained by them comes in the Sarga 119, where Ram requests Dasaratha to release himself from this oath that he took that Kaikeyi is disowned and Bharata, her son, is disowned by him. He made that utterance. And when a great personality makes that utterance, it has power. So he requested Ram being compassionate to Kaikeyi, wanted her to not have to suffer. And so please release her from any consequences of that utterance that you made. So that was something for which Ram wanted Dasaratha to relieve Kaikeyi from suffering, from that utterance that he made. And so therefore he was in heaven, and after he returned to heaven, he then went on to the spiritual world. That's one picture of why he was in heaven instead of the spiritual world. Another explanation that's offered, besides the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, there's an understanding that perfected souls may go to some other region than the spiritual world upon leaving this world to give their association and deliverance. A nice example, common in Mahabharata, is the description that after the Pandavas left this world, they went to the hellish region of Mahabharata, say they went to heaven, and Indra, with his mystic power, showed a mystical, not real, hellish region, and then it was withdrawn. Other explanations are they went, Gaudiya Acharyas indicate the Pandavas went to give association to Yamaraj, who has this difficult service where he doesn't get much devotee association. And for those persons suffering in the hellish region, therefore they went to give their association. And Acharyas support that understanding is found elsewhere in scripture. For example, when the Navayogendras arrive at the yajna of King Nimi, a verse is spoken where it says great personalities like this, they travel here and there and give their association to worldly people. Or in the prayers of the Prachetas, when they meet Lord Vishnu, they offer their respects to Lord Vishnu in a similar way, speaking that great saintly persons, they may do this to give their association to people who are caught in worldly existence. And demigods are also caught in worldly existence. There's similar passages elsewhere. Brihat Bhagavatamrita, for example, when meeting Lord Shiva, there's a conversation between Ganesh and Gopakumar, where Ganesh indicates that Vaishnavas, the Vishnu Dutas, and Vaishnavas travel here and there to give their association. So we find perhaps one plausible explanation is that Dasaratha was there to give his association to the residents of heaven, to elevate them to transcendence beyond the so-called pleasures of heavenly realm. We find one more example, and there's no commentary to this effect, but like Yashoda and Nanda, from the eternal spiritual realm, they have their expansions, Drona and Dara, which we hear about at the end of chapter 8 of Canto 10. They're partial expansions of Drona and Dara. So let's step back and just speak very clearly and plainly. Dasaratha is eternally the father of Lord Ramachandra in the spiritual world Ayodhya. And Kaushalya is eternally the mother of Ram in Ayodhya. They don't become or stop being. They're eternally in that position. And anything that they do, just like during this Damodar month, Mother Jasoda doing something that displeased Damodar. She set him down and didn't interrupt her breastfeeding of little Krishna and went to rescue milk on the stove, and he became angry. Now, why did she go to the stove? She doesn't have any interest other than Krishna. So that means Krishna inspired her to go do what she did. Similarly, Lord Ramachandra inspired Dasaratha to do what he did. Not only that, Ramchandra inspired Kaikeyi to do what she did to facilitate his pastimes. Totally out of character behavior for Kaikeyi. She did something unthinkable by her character. And how's that? By the inspiration of the Lord within her heart, Lord Ramachandra within her heart, inspired her to do what she did. The pastimes of personality Godhead cannot be reduced to some material formula. So stepping back from this little section, it's a pastime. We get out our whitewash big brush and just whitewash it. It's a pastime between the personality Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, and his eternal Father. Because Ramchandra doesn't have a father, after all. I mean, the Supreme Lord doesn't have a father. But in their eternal situation in Ayodhya, he has a father. It's a rasa. And that his loving father cannot do anything other than, like a loving parent, love Ram. So this is a interesting, not easy to understand pastime of Lord Ramachandra, greeting his father, descending, being introduced by Lord Shiva, right there in Valmiki Ramayana. Introduced by Lord Shiva, here's your father. And they're delighted to see their father because they didn't get to see him. They didn't get to perform his funeral. And here he is, descending from heaven. And so they offer their salutations appropriately to greet their father. And then Dasaratha speaks to them in a very beautiful way. He says several things. One of them is, although I've been in heaven for some time, it's not peaceful there. And all the adoration that the denizens of heaven offer to me, I don't like it. But now seeing you and Lakshman in this healthy condition, having defeated Ravana, having upheld my word, having redeemed Sita, and now back in your association, my happiness knows no limit, and all that sadness is driven far away. Then he speaks about embedded within his heart are the cruel words of Kaikeyi. So he's still feeling, after such a long period of time, some unpleasant feeling burned in his heart, deep in his heart, these harsh words of Kaikeyi. He comes off the Vimana, he embraces Ram, and he places Ram on his lap, like a boy, a father placing his son on his lap. And Ram and Lakshman speak similar words of appreciation for their quality and the character of their father. And Ram makes one request very directly. Please withdraw that utterance that you made so that Kaikeyi and Bharata not have to suffer. So be it. It's an important step because it's indelible otherwise. And in fact, then Dasaratha goes on to glorify Bharata, saying he's noble, and all of the qualifications and qualities that Bharata had. Completely dedicated to you. He's very eager to have you return and resume the throne. Please return quickly. Kaikeyi is so fortunate. She'll again see you and be in your association. I'm happy for all of you. He turns to Sita and says to Sita, please don't hold any ill feeling towards Ramachandra for not immediately accepting you, but having you undergo this ordeal that even the demigods were objecting to. Because this ordeal you've been through, it supersedes anyone, any faithful, chaste wife in the whole history. So your quality now stands above suspicion and the most exalted amongst faithful, chaste wives. All glories to you. And having spoken this way, Dasaratha gets back on his Vimana and goes back to the heavenly realm. It doesn't say specifically, but the understanding is from there he went to the spiritual world because that's his eternal residence, his eternal place. The next sarga is Lord Indra speaking, saying, we, the demigods, have come where you fulfilled the purpose that we request of you. You please ask of us anything that you like. Within our power we will do. So what he wants is the welfare of the Vanaras. So he requests Indra, although it is a very difficult request, please restore all the Vanaras who died, who gave up their lives during this battle. Please bring them back to life. Restore their bodies as whole, without any wounds, and when they live, may their living situation be bountiful. Let there be rivers and ample fruits and things for them to have to maintain themselves. Please grant this one request. Now, he's the personality Godhead. He doesn't need demigods to do anything. But Indra accepts. It's very difficult what you've asked, but never have I modified a request made of the demigods, and so be it. They will be restored. It's a very beautiful scene. And then the next scene is Vibhishan is now the king, and he has made an arrangement for sacred bath for Ram and Lakshman and Sita, with all kinds of decorations and fragrances and so forth, and fine cloth and everything. And he makes his appeal. It's cordial and appropriate. And with folded palms, Ram requests, I don't want to say no, but I'm very anxious to again be with Bharata. Bharata may not be able to maintain his life if I don't return, so please permit me to return swiftly. And Vibhishan accepts that appeal and says, very easily I can have you return to Ayodhya within 1 day. I'll arrange for Pushpaka Vimana. So then Ram says, very important, he says to Vibhishan, you have received so much service from the Vanaras. They risked their lives, and some of them gave their lives fearlessly to assist you to regain the kingdom. Any king who receives service from his soldiers and simply asks them to wage in battle and kill on his behalf, but doesn't reciprocate appropriately, will soon lose the loyalty of those soldiers. So please make arrangements for these Vanaras to be amply satisfied and rewarded for their service. And immediately Vibhishan, so many arrangements for valuables and so many other gifts to generously bestow his expression of gratitude upon them. It's a cultural point, but it's something that Ram never overlooks in haste to get back and be together with Bharata again. All the way, all subtle, important reciprocations with his devotees are observed by Ram. So Pushpaka Vimana descends. The Vanaras ask, can we go with you? And Ram consents. Again, Pushpaka Vimana is quite expandable. We hear some description in several earlier sections of Ramayana how big it is, but it's even how big it is, it can become bigger and bigger. So the Vimana arrives, they all ascend to the Vimana, and Ram begins describing directly to Sita the places as they're flying overhead, points out this place, the other place, where these events took place. He shows her the place flying overhead where he first met Sugriva. They descend in Kishkinda, the place where the bridge was, the place it recounts. It's a retelling of the Ramayana again in this section, narrating it to Sita, and he shows her these places where the bridge was built, where Vibhishan surrendered, where the ocean personified came forward and gave his assistance. He narrates in reverse order the events because they're going back now in the northerly direction. They stop in Kishkinda, and Ram shows Sita where Shabari lived, where he first met Sugriva, where the saying of Valmiki took place, and he narrates the events. Not in detail, but in a summary way, at least the Ramayana recounts in a summary way. Now everyone's again on board the Vimana, Pushpaka Vimana, and they go flying and pointing out other places where Panchavati was, where Chitrakoot was. Of course, Sita was also there, and in Panchavati as well. And then they fly overhead above the ashram of Bharata Muni and indicate in that distant direction is where Guha and Bharata reside. So again, Pushpaka Vimana descends. They come before Bharata Muni, and Bharata Muni again narrates Ramayana, the pastimes, that he was able to see through his mystic powers. As a rishi, he is able to see things in a distant place. And he narrates the events one more time, a little mini Ramayana summary. Ram asks Bharata Muni about the welfare of Bharata. How is he faring? And Bharata Muni indicates he's maintaining his life just on the expectation that you will return, which is what Ram wanted to hear. Ram is very sensitive to the fact that Bharata, over the passage of so many years, may have become attached to the kingdom. And if he is, I wish that he would maintain the kingdom, and I'll assist him. I'll be subordinate to him. But he wants to know what his mood is. Bharata Muni indicates what his mood is, and then Ram gives an assignment to Hanuman. Go find out in person. First, go see Guha and explain to Guha that I'm well, and then go forward. He'll be very happy. You go forward and find Bharata and assess by his countenance and his words, is he attached or does he wish for me to resume the throne? And either way, I'll be happy to serve. So Hanuman is dispatched. Hanuman assumes not a monkey form or a Vanara form, but a human form. He goes to meet Guha. They have a wonderful exchange. We're getting closer to Diwali, the arrival in Ayodhya. He goes to Bharata's ashram, and of course he's in a human form. Bharata doesn't know who he is. Hanuman speaks very clearly. He's a representative of, a messenger of Ram. Very soon he will be coming, and Bharata faints. He's so thrilled with emotion, he faints, he loses external consciousness. And when he regains his external consciousness, he begins inquiring again and again and again from Hanuman. Hanuman's a really good storyteller. As Hanuman told the whole story of Ram to Sita, he's now telling the whole story of Ram to Bharata. And he wants to, he's gotten the answer that he was asked to get. What's Bharata's mood? So he, Hanuman, says, let us go greet Ram. So immediately Bharata makes arrangements with Shatrughna for the passage from his place. Nandigram is about 2 miles plus. We visited that when we went to Ayodhya. Do you remember? You weren't there. Okay. She's poking Daddy to see if he remembers. We went there. It's a nice place. Very nice place. So arrangements are made, a royal procession, the queens come, some 100 elephants, the whole big scene to go to where Ram is. The Pushpaka Vimana leaves Bhardraj Muni's ashram, goes just a short distance from Bharata's ashram, and from there it's sent back to Kuvera. And Ram is greeted. It's a very detailed, loving scene where the mothers and Bharata and Shatrughna, they're so happy, and they decorate Ram and they bring him to his ashram, and then they get on chariot. Now, many paintings I've seen of Diwali don't depict what's in Valmiki Ramayana. What's in Valmiki Ramayana is not that they came back in Pushpaka Vimana to Ayodhya at night with all the lamps, but they came by chariot, because Pushpaka Vimana, according to Valmiki Ramayana, is already turned. And then comes this wonderful scene of the citizens of Ayodhya, after 14 years of barely being able to maintain their lives. It's like Krishna returning to Vrindavan. Ram has returned to Ayodhya. The 14 years of exile, Bharata has been fulfilled. Ravana, who they knew very well, Ravana, as a terrible personality, has been slain. All the Rakshasas in Janastan and part of the kingdom of Dasaratha, or the Ikshvaku dynasty kingdom, they've all been slain. Clean slate. All the purpose of the Lord's appearance has been fulfilled. The purpose of the Lord's appearance has been fulfilled, but he's returning. So there are a variety of Ramayanas that describe this, and only briefly, specifically because this is Diwali, Deepavali, the Festival of Lights. There's not a big long section in Ramayana about lights. It mentions all the windows and doors, and other Ramayanas explain the ladies all have trays with ample lamps, and it lights up the night like the sun rising, and they're there to receive, and details and details and details of how the city is decorated, as one could imagine. Ayodhya is an opulent city, and they're displaying the abundance of the opulence of Ayodhya appropriately in honor of the return of Lord Ram, their new king. And there's details and details of offering of gifts. A really nice section, very, very beautiful section, is Ram gives a gift to Sita of a necklace of pearls. And he suggests that she should bestow this. She doesn't mention Hanuman by name, but she should give this as a gift to that person who, and she lists the qualities of Hanuman. Sita is beaming, very happy. She immediately goes to Hanuman, decorates Hanuman with the string of pearls. There's some nice stories about what Hanuman does with the pearls. But that's not in Valmiki Ramayana. It's other stories. And Ram makes arrangements for Sugriva to stay in his palace, fit for the king of the Vanaras. Sugriva, Vibhishan is still there. So the big festival and the coronation of Ram. There's details and details of something very similar to the marriage ceremony. Details and details. Very similar in Chaitanya Bhagavat when Lord Chaitanya is married. Details and details, a big deal. Details and details. All the details of a big marriage. But this is coronation. It's a joyous time. Not only Ram has returned, Ram is going to rule. When Ram arrives at when Bharata reaches, he carries, as he left Chitrakoot carrying Ram's shoes on his head, his padukas, he puts them back on his head. He goes to the throne, gets the padukas, carries them on his head, places them before Ram, and asks Ram to please put your feet in these shoes, because I've been bearing this burden, but I'm like a tiny ox carrying a great load. I can't bear this load. It's for you, which is what Ram wanted to know. Has he become attached? Bharata never deviated from his mood of being the servant of Ram from any step of the way. It's just part of the consistent character that we hear about Bharata. Again and again and again, hearing this wonderful character, Bharata. At some point in time, here in the USA, I did this already with the devotees in China, but rather than narrating the story of Ramayana, like we're doing just now, of Ram's return to Ayodhya, we're taking the personalities of Ramayana, and the character of Bharata is just excellent. Each of the personalities in Ramayana have their prototype or archetype of personality, and his is just fantastic. He's a hero. He's a hero. And as Ram has forgiven Kaikeyi, only for that reason Bharata didn't slay Kaikeyi, his own mother. He says that to Shatrughna. Another time we'll narrate. Let's go back to Ram's return to Ayodhya, Diwali. The queens honor the wives of the Vanaras, again, because they're not in Vanara forms. They all have this shape-changing potency, and they've all taken human-like forms. And after everyone is honored and the coronation takes place, a big festival, they all return back to Ayodhya, back to Lanka for Bibhishan, back to Kishkinda for Sugriva and the Vanaras. And there's Ram with Lakshman. He requests Lakshman, this is in this same section, you please be the Prince Regent, you assist me. And he refuses, and he refuses, and he refuses. So then finally, Ram relents. Usually it's the other way around, but this case, Ram relents, and he requests Bharata to assist him with the title Prince Regent. And Bharata liked the position of just being the servant. So Bharata accepts. And we hear Valmiki Ramayana say, way back in Balakanda, now here again, in this final section, he ruled for 11,000 years. Now just a little comment on the 11,000 years. This is a previous yuga, towards the beginning of Treta Yuga, where lifespan is much longer. And so 11,000 years is very reasonable. Very reasonable. Now, when he ruled, he wasn't always in Ayodhya. He sometimes had to go here and there for his service as the king. There's a really nice description, very beautiful description, where there was one Brahmin. This is not Diwali story, it's another story. There was one Brahmin in his kingdom. When Ram went away and he couldn't see Ram, he would fast. So he was gone for something like 11 days. and the Brahmin fasted. It wasn't Ekadasi. It was just Ram wasn't there, so he fasted even from water. And when Ram came back, then he broke his fast. And Lakshman informed him, there's this Brahmin here in Ayodhya that he has this practice. So Ram made an arrangement that a deity of himself would be gifted to the Brahmana, so he wouldn't have to fast because he would always be right there in his home with the Brahmana in his deity form. Very nice story. So Ram Raja, and the kingdom flourished, and people were virtuous, and it was a very special time. The rule of Ram. This is a little summary, and if those of you that like, you can read the whole section from Ramayana of Ram's departure from Ayodhya and everything that we just kind of summarized. The festival of Diwali. And we like offering lamps to the Supreme Lord. This day we can offer both to Ram and to Damodar. Offering lamps to the Supreme Lord. So let's see if there's some persons online joining this discussion on Diwali Day, to see if you have some topics you'd like to bring up for discussion. And again, if you have a question you want to speak, you can unmute and then mute yourself again afterwards. Can try to do like that. Or you can send something to the chat box, and maybe Jai Sachinandana can read out the questions. A little pause to give you some time to reflect.
Guru Maharaj, thank you very much for the very inspiring lecture and recounting this pastime and the loving exchanges between Lord Ram and his incredible associates. There's a chat message or question from Radhakund Mataji asking, Mr. Khan, recited by Hanuman.
I can get it.
When is Sundara Khan?
When it begins from Hanuman preparing to jump. He's not yet on the mountain, Mahendra mountain, but that's where it begins. He's preparing, and then he gets ready, and the first 30 verses is his beginning leap, qualifying himself to make this mission possible. And it ends when he reports back to Ram that he found Sita, and he embraces Hanuman. That's where it begins and ends. Sundarakanda.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So Hanuman recites the Sundarakanda because he tells the whole story. Can you give some light on that?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Does Hanuman recite it? No. It's recited about Hanuman by Valmiki. He's the reciter.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj.
So like when Hanuman is speaking to Sita, it's Valmiki narrating what Hanuman said to Sita, what he thought, what he felt, etc. The narrator is Valmiki. The narrator.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Anything else over there on the Portland end?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is Madhav Haridas. Please accept my obeisance.
Speak a little louder, please, because we'll have to turn up the volume a little to distort the sound.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, I have a question. So the relationship between Lord Ram and Sita Devi,
is mostly in the mood of separation. Like there is an intense period where they are separated for a long time. Was this devotion in separation established or during that time, or how do we relate that with what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu propagated?
Well, it sounds like two questions. The first question is, was there service and separation? The answer is yes, and it was twice. During that 1 year period where she was kidnapped, and then after Ram sends her to the ashram of Valmiki. So there's two separation sections in Ram's Leela, and both of them are Vipralamba Bhav, service and separation, love and separation. The second question sounds like, how does it correlate to Lord Chaitanya's mood of separation from Krishna? There's a parallel, but specifically the mood of Lord Chaitanya is separation from Krishna. And there's a lengthy, very lengthy description by Jiva Goswami explaining that the spontaneous love, Raganuga Bhakti, the spontaneous love that the devotees can attain is specific to Krishna. Where Krishna is the object of attachment, sakti, and then the feelings of separation. And so it's a detail, it's not exactly what you're, but because Lord Chaitanya was teaching love for Krishna. Now, it's not that all the associates of Lord Chaitanya were Krishna Bhaktas. Most of them were Krishna Bhaktas. There are some very prominent exceptions, but mainly Krishna Bhaktas. So the love that Lord Chaitanya was showing in separation was specific, separation from Krishna. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
The principle of love and separation can be variously manifest, like a nice example, two nice examples. One nice example is Hanuman. After Ramchandra returned, he purposefully left Hanuman behind with the instruction, which was fulfilling an instruction of Lord Brahma, or a blessing of Lord Brahma, that for as long as the universe exists, as long as there's mountains and rivers, this Ramayana will be heard and remembered. And Hanuman was given that service, which he is performing, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, where he is, Kim Purusha Varsha, he is, along with other associates, continuously chanting Ram's glories, happily. So he's feeling separation. Ram returned without him, left him behind. But he gave him some service, so that sense of connection is through service. When we're feeling separation, the medium of connection is service. Another is Prahlad Maharaj. After Lord Vishnu returned to the spiritual world, he was feeling separation. Excuse me, Dhruva was feeling separation. So there's examples of other than residents of Krishna Loka feeling separation from the Lord. It's a bhav, it's a type of love. Anything else from the Portland side? We have one young devotee here who probably has a question or three. So we'll give her the microphone. And I hope you'll be able to hear her nice voice asking whatever she has in her mind.
This is, I think, a follow-up question from one of the Matajis who asked about Hanuman telling about the Sundarakanda.
Okay. Sundarakanda, go ahead.
So when Hanuman was telling Bharat about about basically retelling the Ramayana, isn't that like showing off? Because most
No,
of
it's
it
not showing off. His mode is not showing off. He was serving Ram, and devotees like to hear about those services to Ram that are pleasing to him. That's not showing off. No false ego. Zero.
Okay. Second question is, I remember you said Sita gave him a string of pearls and was decorating him. So I think I know it, but will you just say what happened? I think I know it, but I just want to
I've heard different versions of what happened.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm reluctant to say what those different versions are, especially since it's not in Valmiki Ramayana.
Oh, so in Valmiki Ramayana, Sita didn't string Hanuman with the beads.
Sita gave the pearls to Hanuman. What happened after that is not in Valmiki Ramayana, but it's other people that like to tell Ramayana in creative ways that I'm a little reluctant to repeat because it may be just their creativity or someone that's creative saying something creative.
Okay.
Okay?
I don't have a third question.
That's it.
I'll think of it.
Okay. She forgot.
Yeah, I forgot.
Okay.
Maharaj,
Yes.
Raj, forgive me for interrupting. There's a question on the chat window from Paras Prabhu. I'll just repeat it.
Okay.
So it says, Hare Krishna, some people, especially people with leftist ideology, defame Lord Ram and Ramayan, quoting the incident about Lord Ram sending Mother Sita to Valmiki ashram during her pregnancy. How does one respond to that?
How does Ram respond to which?
Well, how does one, I presume he means himself or other devotees, respond to that criticism of Lord Ram sending Mother Sita to Valmiki ashram during her pregnancy?
How does Ram justify it? The sound on this end is not so crisp. It's kind of muffled. That I'm having a hard time hearing. Can you repeat what was said? Paramarupa? Can you just answer the question? So while we're... Oh, I see. You're going to speak on the microphone. Okay.
Hare Krishna, some people, especially people with leftists ideology,
Leftist? Leftist, okay. Okay, got it.
defames Lord Ram and Ramayana, quoting incident about Lord Ram sending Mother Sita to Valmiki ashram during her pregnancy. How does one respond to that?
Okay, the leftist view. Okay. I'm sure that there's elaborate commentary on this topic that I'm not familiar with. But the lighter version that I am familiar with is two things. One is Ramchandra wanted to show that as an ideal king, one places the well-being of the citizens before one's own happiness. So his own happiness was to be with Sita. The well-being of the citizens was, if there's some doubt over here, then it's probably more than just over here. probably in multiple places. And so to make quiet the talk in the town, then he left no room for suspicion. He sacrificed his own happiness for the well-being of the citizens. Now, there's a counter-argument to that says Sita already proved purity and so forth and so on. There's ample evidence, but that nonetheless, knowing all that, Ram decided to place the well-being of the citizens above his own happiness. And well, what about Sita's unhappiness? What about that? So the discussion goes back and forth. It's just, as an ideal king, he placed the protection and well-being and sanctity of his citizens above all else, as an ideal king. A second answer is it's part of his Leela. Sita has to made her appearance from Earth, and Sita makes her disappearance in the same way. It's part of the grand picture of the Leela of Sita appearing, Sita disappearing. And the third explanation is the mood of separation, which was arranged by the Lord's internal potency. Now, is a leftist critic going to like any of these answers? No. A leftist critic will say, harumph. I reject Ram because I'm a leftist person, or whatever the language is. This was wrong, and I can't accept because it was wrong. So if one sticks by those kinds of rules, that is to say, similar to this, let's go back to Dasaratha. He placed upholding his word above the all happiness should go to the personality of Godhead. In contrast, Vasudeva, he also gave his word. Vasudeva gave his word. Each of the children born of Devaki, I will give to you. And when the 8th child is born, he didn't do that. Instead, he did what he did, and then allowed Kamsa to think that the 8th child was a female and tried to kill the female and so forth. So he placed the personality of God above morality, whereas Dasaratha placed morality above the personality of Godhead. And of course, there were a number of persons that strenuously objected. One of the chief of them was Lakshman. So back to Sita being sent to the forest. The transcendentalist understands the personality of Godhead when he appears in this world. He's establishing principles. And there's a principle that he was establishing that places the well-being of the citizens above all else. And there's another factor, and that's Leela and Rasa. And to him, Leela and Rasa are more important. Just like Krishna's breaking his word, I won't fight, and then Krishna's fighting, or being prepared to fight with Grandfather Bhishma, because protecting his devotee, the rasa of protecting his devotee, is more important to him than anything. So it's the puzzle for the leftist person that says Ram did the wrong thing, I reject him because he did the wrong thing. Then they'll have to be satisfied with their sensibilities, and with their sensibilities comes the implication in karma and birth and death. So we wish them well, and we stick by what Ram wants. That's our position. And that person probably isn't going to be satisfied. But what can we do? Anything else in your chat window?
Not yet, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. We have Radha ready to ask another question.
This is about Bharata, or Ram being doubted, or Ram being a bit confused about Bharata, or wanting to know if he's attached to the kingdom.
He wasn't confused. He's omniscient. It's etiquette.
I heard that when Ram and Lakshman were in Chitrakoot and Bharata's coming with his army to try to get him back, Lakshmana was
Agitated.
yeah, but Ram was like, if there were some examples, if like that, Bharata cannot be attached to the kingdom.
Yes.
But then when he came back, why was he wondering if Bharata was attached to the kingdom?
He's showing proper conduct. He's showing proper conduct. One of the 6 opulences is renunciation. He's omniscient. He knows Bharata's heart. But it's in the Leela, he's showing etiquette. If someone is really attached, so be it. I'll be supportive of my younger brother who is attached. So he won't have to worry about me. And he can rule the kingdom, and I'll help him. He's showing courtesy and etiquette in Vaishnava dealings and relationships. He doesn't need to find out. He's omniscient. It's etiquette. He's teaching us how we should be.
Yeah, thank you.
She's got one more.
I'm thinking about
She
it.
did write it down, so she can't
Yeah.
remember.
And
How about you two? Anything? No? Okay. How are we doing? Are we ready to wrap up?
No, there are questions on that.
Okay, you can read because the speaker system is better over here. Can you hear well when he speaks, Jai Sachinandan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, because when you speak, it's still a little muffled or staticky or something.
So these are questions from the YouTube channel, not from Portland. So first question is from Sarvabhauma Prabhu. Is there any different realm of Lanka present now when Chiranjeevi Vibhishan is still ruling or staying? Is there a different realm of Lanka present now where Chiranjeevi, because Vibhishan is considered to be one of the Chiranjeevis who is still living.
I don't know any scriptural reference that says one way or the other about that question.
Okay.
So I'll remain silent.
Okay, next question is from Ravi Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Hanuman is eternal devotee of Lord Ram, but in earthly pastimes, does he always remember Lord Ram as the Supreme Lord? As serving Lord Ram in that mood?
Yes.
Okay. And served Lord Ram in that mood. Okay. Okay, next question is from Ananda Prabhu. Maharaj, you were glorifying Bharat's personality and were mentioning about series of other discourses discussing different personalities from Ramayana. When I hear such glories, I naturally have such a high regard of their qualities. But when situations come, I have my own struggles or limitations in being able to exhibit such behaviors or qualities. Even though having deep appreciation, I feel a despondency of never being able to cross over the liminal space, as you said once. Please share some inspirations or practical steps.
I like very much the teaching of Ramanujacharya that says, if you want to develop qualities, he gives a formula. You identify personalities, either present, past, or scriptural, that personify or exemplify that quality that you wish to cultivate. And then you read about them, you hear about them, you remember them, you speak about them, you try to serve them, etc. In this way, you're associating with them and you develop qualities like them. So it's a gradual cultivation process. So that's my advice. I like Ramanuja's teaching in that point.
Next question is from Snehavalli Mataji. If Guru Maharaj could again explain how Dasaratha went to heaven and had that grudge against Kaikeyi in his heart even after leaving his body, some explanation would be helpful.
Our transcendental picture is that's not possible. The transcendental picture is yam yam vapi smaran bhavam chachatante kalevaram. And Dasaratha was his whole life, during the life of Ram, thinking of Ram. His mind was absorbed in Ram. So when he went to Ram, there was nothing impure there. That's the transcendental understanding. So putting the transcendental understanding on pause, we have Valmiki Ramayana that says what it says. So how do we understand something that's different than our transcendental understanding is the question. And we have to turn to acharyas that give an explanation. And I can't offer an explanation, well, wait a minute, that contradicts Bhagavad Gita and everything we've been taught. I can't answer that question. Other than there's some lesson which Valmiki wishes to teach, or the Lord wishes to teach through Valmiki's writing of Ramayana. And that is, you place those who teach the principle of surrender, you place the interest of the personality of Godhead above everything else. 1866 Bhagavad Gita. Because Dasaratha didn't do that, he was unqualified to go to the spiritual world. But by the mercy of Ram, he was delivered to the heavenly realm. And in the heavenly realm, he didn't like it. That's what he says to Ram and Lakshman. I don't like it. I'm not peaceful there. And they praise me too much. I don't like that either. And it's not like, I'm feeling pained by this, the harsh words of Kaikeyi etched in my heart. Although he says it, it's not he's just disclosing that's something that's there. And Ram is relieving him of that pain just by his request. And Ram is wishing well of Kaikeyi. So it's not easy to understand because it goes against our fundamental transcendental teachings. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. So there has to be some alternative explanation, and here's some. We gave two other ones, alternative explanations. He was giving his association to the residents of heaven, like the Pandavas gave association to Yamaraj. Because poor Yamaraj, he's got this really unpleasant service. He's not in a nice city in America. He's in hell doing his service. Let's go give him some nice association, sadhu sangha. That was the Pandavas. That's an explanation of the Pandavas visiting Yamaraj. Not because of karma, Not because of karma. Not because of karma. He's just being merciful and giving association. The Pandavas. So that's another explanation. Plausible explanation. And he was just there for a while and then with the spirit world after giving some association.
Question popped up in the Portland Zoom. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, this is Jay Lakshmi Devidasi.
Uh-huh.
Just like there is Golok Vrindavan in spiritual world, do we have Lord Ram's abode too in spiritual world, and where he continues to rule as a king?
Yes. The Ayodhya Dham is in the realm of Haridham or Vaikuntha Dham. And you probably have access to one of those posters that depicts the three realms, Devi Dham, Haridham, and Goloka Dham. And the abode of Lord Ramachandra is the uppermost region of Haridham. You'll see in the poster, or I'm describing to you. It's at the uppermost region of Haridham. Okay, are we done?
No.
No?
Question.
Guru Maharaj, Paramakarana Prabhu has a question that he'd like to ask verbally.
Okay, please go forward.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, just was wondering if you could give some insight into the what is our Gaudiya Vaishnava or under Srila Prabhupada's family? What is the position or our acceptance of Sri Ramcharitmanas as per the instructions of Srila Prabhupada? How should we accept that? Or I've heard sometimes that there are, of course, some differences between Valmiki Ramayana, which is, of course, the standard basis. But how should we understand some differences, or what's our position or on the acceptance of Ramcharitmanas as a valid reference of the pastimes of
I got the
Lord
question.
Ram?
I got the question. The answer, there's two answers. And the little clause that I heard you say is, Srila Prabhupada, what was his view? And Srila Prabhupada gave caution, or stayed stronger. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that there are some places, I don't know where those places are, there are some places in Ramcharitmanas that are explicitly impersonal. And so he did not want his followers to go through Ramcharitmanas. Now, on the other hand, he was a great devotee of Lord Ramachandra. And like when we were conducting the yatras, we visited and we spoke about him. He's a great devotee. His life was a life of devotion to Ram, exclusively. So there are devotees in ISKCON, very exalted personalities in ISKCON. That's their favorite. They speak regularly from Ramcharitmanas. So that depends on your upbringing, I guess. Without mentioning names, there are some devotees, very senior devotees, that they speak regularly from Ramcharitmanas, and that's it. They're not going to not speak from Ramcharitmanas. They grew up with it, they love it, and they have regard, and they know the difference between impersonalism and personalism, and they discriminate accordingly. So, when I started participating in Krishna consciousness, I heard the former Prabhupada making statements, and so I kind of like didn't involve myself with Ramcharitmanas. But there are many passages in Ramcharitmanas that we hear all the time that aren't in Valmiki Ramayana. For example, Lakshman Rekha. Or, for example, there's a detailed description in Ramcharitmanas of what the festivities were upon Ram's return to Ayodhya, which is missing in Valmiki Ramayana, just on Diwali day. It's not there. All the details that are in Ramcharitmanas are not there. Or when Ram returned from Lanka, he stopped at the place where he had crossed, where the bridge was built, and he worshipped, having killed Ravan, because although he was a demon, he was born in a Brahmin family, so he wanted to atone for that, having killed a Brahmin-born person, and so he wanted to worship Lord Shiva to atone for that mistake or that misgiving. And so, the description is Hanuman was sent to get a Shila, and he took some time to get back, and so Sita made a Shila of Lord Shiva with her own hand, and Ram worshipped that, and then Hanuman came. So all of that description, it's not in Valmiki Ramayana. But, listen carefully, but when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went on his travel in South India, he went to that place. He went to the temple where that linga that was fashioned by the hand of Lord Sita, and by its side is the linga that Hanuman brought, and there's a temple there, and he visited there. Although it's not in Valmiki Ramayana. It's in Ramcharitmanas. So, I'm most comfortable following faithfully Srila Prabhupada's, option A. And, honoring that Lord Chaitanya can make some discrimination about which portions and which portions not, and so forth. That's I'm not giving you a cookie cutter black and white answer. I'm responding to your question as best I can. Okay?
Yes, Maharaj, well accepted. Thank you so much.
Guru Maharaj, do you have time for more questions?
Sure, but his voice
I know.
his voice was very clear. Yours is quite garbled. Sorry to say. It's just a system. I don't know what it is. So
Okay.
if you,
Ujjwal Prabhu, would you like to say your question directly?
I can read.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Yeah, my question is like in South India, Diwali is celebrated as Naraka Chaturdasi, when Krishna has killed, Krishna along with Satyabhama killed Narakasura. So, and the other thing is like Rama killed Ravana and we celebrate Diwali. So, why these two different aspects of Diwali?
the killing of, if I understood your question correctly, Dussehra takes place October 25th. It takes place close to 20 days before Diwali. It's two different events on two different dates. Did I understand your question correctly? We don't celebrate the killing of Ravan on Diwali. Is that his question?
Maybe I can repeat the question.
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
So in South India, Diwali is celebrated also as Naraka Chaturdashi, when Krishna along with Satyabhama killed demon Narakasura.
Okay.
So in the on the chat window it is showing up as when this happened, but I think what he asked was why this difference.
Well, in
Yes.
different parts of India, one may celebrate this, and another place they celebrate that. And it's also, Kali Puja. In Bengal, they celebrate something else on Diwali Day. So, it depends what part of India you're from. But I'm speaking about Diwali specific to Ram's pastime. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Krishna's killing Narakasura. I don't know the detail of when that happened according to Vaishnav calendar or lunar calendar. And it's probably, the local pundits have determined it's today. And so, fantastic. Celebrate that one too.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Guru Maharaj, this is Jai Sachinanda Das. Can you hear me better?
Yes, I can hear you much better.
Thank you. I took off my headphones.
I
have a question. Both Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and Shri Jeev Goswami mentioned that the churning of yogurt by Mother Yashoda is done on Deepavali day.
Yes.
How was that conclusion made? Because Goswami doesn't specifically say that in his recitation to Parikshit Maharaj.
Are you asking how do our acharyas get this realization? Is that your question?
Yes. I mean, it's the Paramatma channel, I presume. But.
Well, two things. One is there may be some scriptural reference that says it. I don't know what that scriptural reference is. And the other, most likely you heard from Hari Parshad, who refers to Brahma Samhita text 61. Yadrashi Yadrashri Shraddha Tadrashi Siddhi Bhavati Tadrashi. Remember that?
Sure.
And so that verse says, Shraddha, the way Bhakti Siddhanta translates Shraddha Bhavati is realization arises according to one's faith. So if Jiva Goswami has a realization, it's not speculation, it's realization. He's experiencing Krishna's pastimes, and he's expressing a detail of Krishna's pastimes that may not have its corroboration in Scripture. And at least for me, that's just fine. I accept Jiva Goswami's realization. Now, there commonly, when he makes some expression like that, you continue reading and reading and reading, and you'll find a scriptural reference that supports what his realization says. But what that scriptural reference says that it was Diwali day, I don't know. It's not in the Bhagavatam, but it doesn't mean it's not in some other scripture. Harivamsa or somewhere. Padma Purana or Vishnu Purana, because they also speak of this pastime. And maybe it's referred to elsewhere, it's on Diwali day.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for that expansion and clarification. My question basically came from reading Krama Sandarbha, G. Goswami, and then Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, not so much from Hari Prasad Prabhu's comments. I mean, Srila Prabhupada himself says, Sri Sanatana Goswami quotes from Vaishnava Toshani about this incident. So I think it's wonderful. I just wanted to understand how we can understand that as scripturally bona fide. But I understand your comment. Thank you.
Another question from the YouTube channel. Hare Krishna Maharaj, I heard in one of the Manvantara periods, Lord Ram's pastimes were on happy side.
Which
didn't need to go to the forest. If you can please provide more information.
I never heard that one. Thank you.
Right.
If you can, whoever's presenting this, if you can provide the scriptural reference, please send it to me.
This is Rasa Krida Prabhu.
Okay, Rasakrita, if you can provide the scriptural reference, that would be wonderful. I've never heard such a thing.
Next question is from Satish Prabhu. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Was reading Ramayana by Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, came across the following statement. The son of Kaushalya represented one half of the potency of Lord Vishnu. Can you please elaborate?
I know that Bhakti Vikas Maharaj is very, very, very meticulous in his presenting things. And as he says in the preface, he's strictly following Valmiki Ramayana. So I don't know Valmiki Ramayana like the back of my hand. If you like, you send me that reference, and I have some scholars that have copies of Valmiki Ramayana, and I'll see if I can find that. Let me know what the reference says, and as much as you can, the context of that reference, and I'll get back to you with, some elaboration if there is one. And I can also, if I don't get it from these other scholars, I'll directly send it to Bhakti Vikas Maharaj and ask for his explanation. And he'll be very prompt in responding. He's very personable. But I don't have the answer, just off the top, sorry. That was our YouTube questions. We're now complete. And I think...
Guru, this is Jai Sachinanda again. Can I ask you a question? Do you have?
Sure. Especially when you don't have your headset on.
So much for material calculation.
Yeah. Okay, much clearer voice. Go ahead.
And this is, a departure from the particular sarga of Ramayana that you're elaborating and describing so wonderfully. I really appreciate the character of Bharata, especially that quality of where he is being criticized heavily by just about everybody when it comes to Ayodhya. And yet he
bears the burden.
He bears a burden, and he bears a vision of his connection to Lord Ram and how it carries him through something that would devastate most devotees. I think you very well know what I'm speaking about. So can you elaborate on that?
Well, he has shelter. And in the name giving, Bharata was the name given. And one of the meanings of Bharata, one of the meanings is to bear burden. So he had that capacity to bear a burden. And sure enough, he was given a burden to bear. And one of the heaviest burdens to bear is the burden of criticism. And especially criticism that's unjust. It's very difficult to bear, and he was able to bear. So he had that character or quality which his name indicated. So he lived accordingly. He had shelter. He had shelter in his relationship with Ram. As it's described like this: Lakshman, from their childhood, he was always with Ram. Ram wouldn't eat unless Lakshman was by his side also eating, etc., etc. Bharata, on the other hand, had the same affection for Ram, but he was always in the background. And Shatrughna was in the background for Bharata. So the servant of the servant of the servant. So Bharata his happiness was the servant of the servant, and his shelter was the service, and the burden was the unjust criticism, and he was able to bear it because he had shelter. When we have shelter, we're able to bear a storm or as in the language of Bhagavad Gita, the most difficult of all tribulations we can bear when you have shelter. So that was his strength, along with his character.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for describing such a wonderful personality. I was reading something in Ramayana that I found very instructive when Bharat was in Bharat Rishi Muni's ashram on their search for Lord Ram, and he was eyeing his mother, Kaikeyi, with seeming anger, understanding that by her instigation, something terrible, seemingly terrible, happened where Lord Ram was banished. Bharadwaj Rishi mentions to him that don't be upset, and I'm paraphrasing, that by that one act of hers, great good will occur to everybody in the universe, including for the saintly and demonic personalities. Just by that one thing she did. I found that very instructive. Would you like to elaborate on that? Or
Not exactly elaborate, but something similar that I like very much is, according to the Sri Vaishnavacharyas that comment on Ramayana, only in 2 places in the whole of Ramayana does Valmiki use the Sanskrit phrase yadrichchaya. Yadrichchaya means somehow or other, meaning there isn't an apparent cause. Everything in this world has a cause or the effect of some cause. But that which is yadrichchaya has no apparent cause, or means it has a divine cause or causeless. So he uses that when speaking of yadrichchaya, Kaikeyi did what Kaikeyi did. And then the other is when Shurparnika did what Shurparnika did. And both of them, Kaikeyi and Shurparnika, were game-changing events. Total shift. The bliss of Ayodhya, and then all of a sudden crash. And then the next is, for 11 years, 8 months, Ram was giving his association to the sadhus, but there hadn't been any killing of demons yet, because that was the other part, Pritranaya Sadhuna. But what about, so the Yadrichchaya, and the explanation is, within Kaikeyi's heart and Shurparnika's heart, Ram prompted. So they did what they did. So they did, the consequence of doing what they did was Ram's plan, and the outcome was also good for everyone, because that's Ram's plan. Although it may not look like it, looked horrible, and everyone felt horrible. And everyone condemned her, and everyone condemned Bharat. But Bharat got to show his character, good, impeccable character, right to the very end, when it was time for Ram's pastimes to end. Bharat wasn't going to stay behind, because he was the Prince Regent. Stay behind and rule. I'm going with you. He didn't stay behind. He was attached to the very end. That's a nice little conclusion of all of this. So I think we should wrap it up and
thank you very much.
Call it a day, or call it a morning over there. Thank you very much, Prabhupada.